Salutations, respected viewers. I am George from Ireland, and I'm outside Arlington Park Mansions in London. And this building is where M Forster lived. So he was a celebrated novelist, in case you haven't heard of him. He was born here in the United Kingdom in 1879 into a very affluent family. He's mostly English, partly Irish. So his name was actually Edward Morgan Forster, but always known as M Forster. So he went to Tunbridge School, which is in Kent, outside London to the southeast, which he reportedly loathed. Years later, his school said, as his very distinguished old Tunbridgian, would he agree to compose an article for the school magazine. And so his riposte was this: yes, I shall, on one condition: it must be against compulsory games, because he loathed organised sport. And the word game really didn't sum it up for him, because he was bookish and effete and was bullied by boys who were what were called hearties at the time, I suppose, jocks, those who were anti-intellectual and so on. So then he went up to King's College, Cambridge, and in Cambridge University, that is one of the most magnificent ones. For my money, it knocks the socks off Trinity, and people often raving about Trinity. King's was founded by Henry VI. It was going to be the sort of senior version of Eton. The King's scholars of Eton would go on to be scholars of King's College, Cambridge, but that broke down in the 19th century. A few Eton King's scholars go there, not many. Most people at King's are not from Eton at all. Anyway, so he went there, and he soon joined the Apostles. The Apostles was a club which had been founded around about 1820. It's more connected to Trinity College, Cambridge, but you could be anyone from any Cambridge college can join it. So the Apostles is an intellectual society. It's very selective, i.e. there are 12 of them, that's why they're apostles, and they meet once a week for a conversation on some predetermined topic, and they discuss that, and they're not a secret society, but they do not publicize their existence. If someone's an apostle, he or she will be permitted to say so, but put it this way, they don't have a website. They don't seek to disclose what they get up to. And they believe that they should be allowed to express themselves with complete candor. And often they'll be asked for what their most tendentious opinion is. What would you not normally admit to in polite society? And so often they're expressing radical political ideas, communism when that was deeply unfashionable, gender equality, legalizing homosexuality, legalizing abortion, things like that, eugenics, which is quite a popular idea, especially on the liberal left in the early 20th century. Anyway, so he graduated from King's. He inherited a huge sum of money, which would be close to £1 million in value today, making him financially independent. But he got himself a job as a private tutor to a Muslim Indian princeling, and he moved out to India in the first years of the 20th century and spent some time there. He later acknowledged he had some romantic feelings for his pupil, though he said they were never physically expressed. These days, having said that, people say, oh, well, we can't read his books. We have to burn them and take them off the curriculum and things like that. As I say, there was no suggestion that he ever acted on this. So then he came back to the United Kingdom. So his time on the subcontinent helped him to inspire A Passage to India, one of his most renowned works of fiction. So he was homosexual. Obviously, he couldn't declare that in public because such acts were illegal until 1967. But one of his best-known novels now is Morris, which he wrote around the First World War and reworked a few times over the decades, but said this is not to be published until I die, and he didn't die until 1970. And only 2 years after that, it was finally published. So Morris appears to be semi-autobiographical, and it's about a man who goes to Cambridge around about 1900 and is from a middle-class family, probably not quite as well off as M Forster's. So that's Morris, and he meets Clive Durham. Clive's from an upper-class family. His father's an MP, and the two men realise they have a connection. They realise they're attracted to each other in more than the fraternal sense, and they have some sort of liaison. But Clive says, "But we won't have sex. We can spend some time. We can cuddle, but we can't go all the way." So that's that, and they look back to Greek literature. They think, well, this is Hellenistic. This is the purest form of love. Anyway. So they graduate and they go their separate ways. Sorry, I should say Morris drops out and he goes into the city to work in finance. But Clive's father dies, and Clive managed to get elected to be a member of parliament for that constituency. Morris comes back to him and wants to carry on their relationship, but Clive has moved on. For him, that was simply a phase he was going through, and he's decided to be heterosexual. He's got engaged, that's that, and he realised that if a word of this got out, of what he was up to at Cambridge, that'd be curtains for his political career. And he's living in a small, stately home in the countryside. And so Clive is deeply hurt by this. He feels spurned. But there's a manservant called Scudder, who's for pages known simply as Scudder, addressed by his surname, never Mr. Scudder. His Christian name isn't stated for a long time, which emphasises his proletarian status. And Scudder has a habit of getting into bed with upper-class men. But anyway, he forms a relationship with Morris, which turns out to be more than just mindless sex. And they fall deeply in love with each other, and eventually Scudder resigns. I won't go into some of the shenanigans, the meeting at the boathouse that didn't happen, and blah, 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 and Scudder threatening to blackmail him. But eventually they sail off into the sunset to the Argentine to live happily ever after. And this was the first LGBT novel which did not end in catastrophe. That it had a cheerful ending, was an uplifting message. So it made into a film by Merchant Ivory in 1987 with, what's his name? James, I can't remember his Christian name, sorry, surname actually, it might come to me. In the title role, this bloke who was Wilby, who was born in Burma, and Hugh Grant plays his paramour, well, his first paramour, that is, he plays Clive Durham. And I believe I'm right in saying Hugh Grant actually grew up in this building behind me. Well, what a delicious irony that is. So it was 1987, it was the height of the AIDS crisis, so it was actually a very brave thing to do, producing a film which depicted homosexuality in a sympathetic light. And of course people saying, oh, this is terrible, you're evangelizing for sodomy, and you're going to get a lot of young men killed because they're going to die prematurely of this horrific incurable disease. And it was really unmanageable in the 80s. People contracted HIV, their health collapsed very quickly because the immune system was breaking down, and they die in about 3 years in many cases. Obviously, it's a very different story now. E M Forster, he worked a lot for the BBC, producing book reviews. Remember, there's only one radio station there in the 1930s, and he was a grand old man of literature towards the end. He didn't produce much for the last 10 years of his life, and as I say, he died in 1970. So again, someone who deserves to be more widely read. He's got many other views like Where Angels Fear to Tread, A Room with a View, and so on, with locales abroad, particularly Italy. That's enough about E M Forster.